Get excited, Pittsburgh. The NFL draft is almost here. We are inching closer, sprinting closer, really, and we are now a week or so away from the NFL draft here in Pittsburgh. I am Mike Asti, and this is another episode of Mic Drop, available everywhere you get your podcasts, made possible by the Believe Network and played on Sirius XM. And we're going to talk about the NFL draft, the Steelers in the draft, and everything that involves Pittsburgh hosting the NFL draft with a friend and colleague, Alan Saunders of Steelers Now, the beat guy with Steelers Now and known throughout the Pittsburgh media circuit. Alan, how are you doing, man? And are you excited about the NFL draft in Pittsburgh? You're going to be covering it. I'm sure you're going to be there. I don't even have to ask you that, but it's going to be chaos as well. There are some that are not as excited.
Yeah, I would say it doesn't change anything for me because I'm still going to be at the South Side where I normally am. Obviously,
okay, that's fair.
people from my outlet that'll be there.
Yeah, okay.
Brendan Howe and Ed Thompson are going to be down there on the North Shore.
Yeah.
If they can get to the North Shore,
Yeah,
that's not an issue.
right. Yeah.
For me,
thank you to the Penguins who ended up in the postseason.
It's a little bit more trepidation, because if things go poorly, then there's going to be a lot more work. That's what I hope.
Sure.
Hopefully everything goes off without a hitch, and then it'll pretty much be like any other draft for me. So I'm rooting for that.
Yeah. And I will say, and I'm going to be there covering it too, that going to the draft as a fan, I could see it being a bit of an overrated experience. You're doing a lot of standing, waiting, and it's just going to be a sea of humanity. Not really down with that. And I guess covering it, the spots where we're going to really be, whether you're in the South Side or in the media rooms in the North Shore where the draft's going to be, probably not going to be as chaotic as for the fans. But as you mentioned, getting there is going to be the problem, especially with the Penguins now in the playoffs, especially what's going to be going on. Even getting the South Side is going to be utter madness. So forget what the Steelers do. If it goes off without a hitch for the city, it's probably the first order of business that everyone's hoping for. Again, Alan Saunders of Steelers Now, Mike Asti here, Mic Drop with Believe and Sirius XM. Now, a lot to unpack here for this very important Steelers draft, a new era for the Steelers. Every draft's important, but this now the start of a new era with Mike Tomlin gone and Mike McCarthy now the head coach. So to start us off, just simply, how would you rank the Steelers' needs in this draft? Most of them are pretty obvious. The rankings for some are different, but for you, how would you rank their need positions and what they need to accomplish?
Well, I think the number one need is very obviously still wide receiver. They have two now after acquiring Michael Pittman, but they're going to need three that will play almost every down in this offense. They probably need two of them, to be honest, for some depth. They don't really have anyone, beyond. I think they have 16 catches on the roster from last year beyond those first two guys. It's not going to get it done in a pass-first offense like Mike McCarthy's. So to me, that's clearly the number one need. Left guard is also a big need. They didn't re-sign Isaac Seumalo. I think they have better options at left guard in Spencer Anderson and Brock Hoffman, who they brought in from the Dallas Cowboys and has some familiarity with the scheme. I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility that either of those guys steps up and grabs that job. They both played a good bit in part-time roles. But if there's a player that they think they can add to that room, I think they should. That's not exactly overwhelming talent. From there, it's really hard because there's needs at a lot of places. But I don't think there's a clear sort of what's next. I mean, obviously outside of quarterback, which I just don't think is getting filled in a significant way with the players available in this draft.
Yeah, I mean, some bring up offensive line, which you could bring up every single season. Defensive line, tight end has even been brought up depending on the progression of Freiermuth because of the McCarthy offense. Those are other positions to throw out there. With wide receiver being the clear number one position of need for you, and I would agree, and we'll get into more of this throughout this show, but Does that mean that you see them going wide receiver in the first round, or they need to go wide receiver in the first round? Not always the same question of what need position versus what they're actually going to do, because the board has to fall to them. They have to like the player, and sometimes you can do different things in the early second round. But does that connect the dots to what you think has to happen in the first round just because it's the top need position?
Well, I don't think it has to happen, but I think when I think about what I think is going to happen, I mean, there's a very good chance that wide receiver is the best player available, in addition to them needing a wide receiver
Okay.
quite badly. There
Yeah.
are 6 first-round wide receivers. It is not a deep draft at almost any other position. Certainly, there's a chance that someone like a Jermod McCoy or a Spencer Fano, Vega Ioane, guys who are
Sure.
projected to be top 10 to 15 picks, maybe one of those guys gets to them at 21. But I mean, of the players that we think are likely available at 21, I would say the best 3 players are all wide receivers. So I mean, at that point, there's not really
Yeah.
a point of talking about much else.
Maybe it does connect in this particular draft. You're Alan Saunders of Steelers now, Mike Asti here, talking the Steelers draft and their needs here. 2026 draft. If you didn't know, now you know, and you've been living under a rock. It is going to take place in Pittsburgh. You mentioned quarterback being another need position. Everyone knows that as well. Before we fully get into possible quarterbacks they could be selecting, where maybe they could be taking them, and your opinions on maybe some of those quarterbacks that have been brought up and mocked to the Steelers recently, how much of what the Steelers do in this draft, especially at quarterback or lack thereof, depending on when they would draft a quarterback, depends on what Aaron Rodgers does? Or maybe not at all. It could be immaterial to his decision. But we don't have that decision announced as we are speaking and recording this right now. So, how much of what they do at QB or even in the draft in general depends on the whims of Aaron Rodgers, or are they just going in saying, "You're 41. It was a solid year. Wasn't an MVP style year. If you want to come back, okay, but you're not our quarterback for the next 5 years. Like, you're not our future quarterback anyway. So it doesn't matter what you decide for the future of this draft, even if for next year maybe you'll be on the roster."
Yeah, I think it has pretty little impact. I wouldn't think that anyone they're going to draft has almost any chance of playing this year without multiple injuries anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and so, I mean, I think the difference is, you know, if Aaron Rodgers is on the roster, then they're going to start looking at quarterback around round 3 and saying like, "Hey, this is in the mix of the positions that we would like to draft." Uh, if Aaron Rodgers is not on the
It's
roster,
similar to what they did a year ago, pretty
if
much.
Aaron Rodgers is not on the roster, then it
Yeah.
probably is more like, okay, we need to at least get one, have to get one, have
Right.
to add a body to the roster
Right.
starting in about round 3 or so. But I would be very, very surprised if either way a quarterback is taken before that, or that they're really seriously thinking about any rookie. I mean, to me, it's impossible for a rookie to even be the backup, because you have Mason Rudolph there, you have Will Howard there. I
Yeah.
would assume that you're looking at the very best case scenario for a rookie would be to be the third stringer, and maybe force them to trade Rudolph and go into the year that
Yeah.
way.
I could see that. Yeah.
I think that's probably like the best case scenario. So I mean, I really don't think it matters that much. If they don't end up with Rodgers, I would assume that they will sign someone else as a veteran to compete with Mason Rudolph. I don't know who else is still out.
Yeah, and
Jameson.
if you're choosing between Rudolph or Howard, you're trading Rudolph, even though you might not get
Yeah,
much back.
you know,
But
but I don't think it's going to affect their draft plans very much, if at all.
I don't think it should for sure, and I doubt it will. But you're not getting Mendoza. Obviously, you won't be in Pittsburgh. Many of the quarterbacks that some want them to take are no slam dunk. This is not an 83, a 2004 type of guarantee multiple Hall of Famers coming out of this draft. A lot of potential later in the draft. Is there a world for you, depending again off of what Aaron Rodgers decides, they could come out of this draft with, as I'm sure you would imagine, your replies would light up, your comments would light up, and fans would freak out with 0 quarterbacks out of this draft class? Could that be a scenario that they come out with nothing quarterback wise from this class?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think it's a necessity if they do have Rodgers. If they don't, then they probably do need to get somebody. But if Rodgers is signed, or Rodgers, whatever, Rodgers wants to
Yeah,
announce his own timeline. But if they're aware that Rodgers is going to sign,
sure,
let's say
sure.
that before the draft, I did. Everyone is saying like Art Rooney said he expects to have an answer from Aaron Rodgers by the draft.
He did say that.
He
Yes.
did not say that he expected that to be public, just that he expected to have an answer.
That's fair.
Right?
That's
Right?
fair. But
He
that's at
just
least
said,
that's all
we're
he
going
needs,
to
though.
know. Not that you're going to know. We're
Sure.
going to know.
Sure.
Okay? Aaron's going to do his own thing. The man has a self-produced documentary called Enigma. Okay?
I understand.
He very much wants to do his own thing. The
Yeah.
Steelers are expecting to know before the draft whether Aaron Rodgers is coming back. That doesn't mean we all will. So if they know that he's going to be back, then no, I would not think there would be some impetus to draft a quarterback just to get one. I mean, if it turns out to be that they like where the board falls and they like good value, someone like a Drew Aller, a Taylor Green, a Cole Payton, they like all three of those players. I think at various points, probably starting with the end of the third round. Carson Beck, they talked to him.
I was going to bring up Beck. Yeah.
I would say there's a good chance that one of those four guys ends up a Steeler, especially if there is no Rodgers. But I mean, if they come out of the draft and the quarterback depth chart still looks the same, I wouldn't necessarily be panicking.
Yeah, and if you have Rodgers, he'll be the guy for one more season. You have Will Howard, who you just recently drafted, kind of doing the same thing you're mentioning there. They could do with Drew Aller or Carson Beck, and maybe you trade Mason, maybe you don't, whatever. So that would make sense as a plan. If Rodgers, and this is a need-to-know business, yeah, that's an incredible point that I don't know if fans are fully digesting. People saying, well, the Steelers are going to know, so we're all just because the Steelers know does not mean you're going to know. You can assume, but there likely maybe won't be a press release just because they know, but they want to know by a certain date. That's definitely important there. There's also a possibility, though, that they could get news that he doesn't want to return. I mean, we can all make assumptions and figure he probably is coming back. Most in media in the world, national otherwise, are saying they are figuring he's coming back. But when you have a documentary titled Enigma, you can change your mind. So that's also a possibility. Do you not then see a scenario where he would tell them, even if there's not a press release, hey, I am not going to play, and then they would come out of it without a quarterback? Because in that scenario, he could still change his mind later on, but they would then be in a more dire scenario unless he changes his mind that he is returning in July.
I would think at that point they would at least feel the need to add a body. I don't know that it would necessarily need to be early, but I think they would then feel
doesn't need to be the future of the franchise necessarily, but they would,
They just assuming they're going to sign one other veteran, and that probably what I would think they would need to at least add a body there.
Yeah. And those quarterbacks you mentioned, third round or beyond, they're going to be able to get one of those, whether they do it in the order they would prefer. Yeah, it wouldn't be difficult to get one of that group in the later rounds here. Again, Alan Saunders of Steelers Now, talking the Steelers in the 2026 NFL Draft in Pittsburgh here on Mic Drop. Now, outside of the quarterbacks we mentioned, Ty Simpson's been brought up a lot, and some mocking him to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Your thoughts on him, and even your thoughts on what the Steelers could do if they really want to get a quarterback in the early rounds, hypothetically.
I don't get the sense that the Steelers are in love with Ty Simpson. I do know that they had some interest back in the scouting process. Okay. They were someone that they scouted repeatedly during the season. I think they saw Alabama 4 times this year. Now, of course, it's Bama, so there's lots of prospects to go around, not just the quarterback. But he was definitely someone that I think, were ahead of the curve on. If you remember, Ty Simpson kind of came out of nowhere last year, but they were at his very first game of the season against Florida State. And so I do think there was like an interest there. I'm not sure that Mike McCarthy necessarily shares that.
Different coaching staff then, right?
When he was talking about what he wants in a quarterback, when the last time we talked to him, and he's talking about, hey, I want big guys, I want guys who can play in the cold, and
Yeah.
And Simpson's a little undersized. It didn't really
From the
line up.
SEC, like it's not
Yeah,
cold.
none of what he is lined up with what McCarthy was
Yeah.
saying he really wants in a quarterback, and so to me that kind of showed a cooling of that interest, and I think those other guys we talked about probably fit what he's looking for better, especially when
Yeah.
you consider that probably need to make a trade up in the second round to get
Yeah.
Simpson, or even maybe a trade back in the first. I don't know where I don't see that being the road they'd go down right now.
Do you think it'd be fair to say that because of this quarterback draft class and just the way it looks, that if the Steelers would take a quarterback prior to the third round, it could be characterized as a reach?
Yeah, there's not a quarterback I like unless they're really moving around the board
Right.
before third round.
Because any of these other guys, they don't have to do tons of work to get. They could wait until the third plus round. If they're doing it earlier and they're moving things around and they're doing a trade for, say, Ty Simpson, despite having success at Bama, the history of Bama, the attributes he doesn't have, the situation now under McCarthy versus the other staff, it's hard not to see that as a reach. And who else if not him in those early rounds? Again, Alan Saunders of Steelers Now here talking to me about the Steelers in the 2026 draft on Mic Drop. You mentioned Carson Beck, you mentioned Drew Aller. Which one of those two do you think is a better pros prospect? And then just any thoughts on either one of them in general? Certainly Drew Aller, who's kind of in our quasi network, covered at Nittany Sports Now throughout our Sports Now family, and kind of in the Pittsburgh sphere there, playing at Penn State. Thoughts on him in general, and then who do you think is a better prospect between Aller and Carson Beck?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's even remotely close. I'm so surprised that these two guys are rated as closely as they are,
Right.
because
That's why I'm asking it. That's why I'm asking it.
Aller
Yeah,
has look, we were talking about Aller as a top 5 pick coming into this year.
we were.
That wasn't crazy talk because he has every physical tool that you would want from a quarterback that would be drafted in that area. Now, did he have a good year? No. Has he ever played well against good competition? Mostly no.
I covered his best game of his life against West Virginia, and that actually was a 9-win Mountaineer team.
Yeah, I
if you look
covered
at
him
the
for a pretty
stats.
good game against USC on the road in 2024 as well. But those are few and far between.
That's what I mean. Those two teams are his best games, and those two teams were really average to good fringe. It wasn't like you're talking any great game against a CFP quality program.
Exactly. And so, and he makes bad mistakes in decision making that often lead to ugly looking turnovers. It's one thing to be a gunslinger and try a little bit too hard to get the ball into a place. His mistakes are big, obvious, bad mistakes.
Yes,
of negative, but he has everything you could physically want. And I look at Carson Beck and I'm like, this guy just cannot throw the football well enough to ever be a good quarterback in the NFL. So what's the point of
he screams like a college QB to me. Yeah.
What's the point of even trying? There's just no arm strength there. Not since the elbow injury anyway. I do not believe that Carson Beck has starting quarterback upside. I'm not I think Drew Aller is very likely to reach it, but he certainly possesses that upside.
Yeah, and I think Beck is riding the wave from Miami this past season, obviously. Success from him, success from the team. He kind of repaired his image and his value despite having the recent injury. That's helping him, but that does not mean it translates into the NFL. It's kind of what you're saying, that success on a great team in college does not necessarily mean you have the attributes. Aller has the attributes, even if his team underachieved and maybe didn't have big games against big-time programs, no matter what you think of the two we mentioned in recent years. So that's all fair to say. Do you buy into any of the talk that Aller was held back in particular by Andy Kotelnicki's offense?
Sure. I mean, I think
that would defend him in terms of draft stock if that's the case.
Held back by their offense to some extent.
Okay.
Do I think Penn State got the most out of Drew Aller? Absolutely not. Okay. And do I think Penn State's offenses were really capable of getting the most out of a quarterback? Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
But, also like would have said the same thing about Jackson Dart, who, I don't think is a great pro prospect, but certainly had a good rookie year,
But he
uh,
was under an offensive known coach. That's not the
but
case,
it's a
James Franklin.
gimmicky offense that's not getting him ready for the NFL.
Sure, sure. But isn't Kotonicki's offense gimmicky and James Franklin's not an offensive guy?
Yeah, but I think to me, there's no difference between the
Okay.
Penn State offense and the Ole Miss offense in terms of like me trying to evaluate the quarterback play in
Yeah.
it. Like, success in Ole Miss's offense means just about as much as success or failure in any other scheme.
Okay.
It's kind of
Yeah.
relevant. So
Yeah.
like, to me, there are actually very few offenses where I'm watching what the quarterback is
In
doing in college
college.
and saying this is going to translate to the NFL.
That's fair. Yeah. That's definitely fair. And that would lend credence to the belief that Aller has if you have the physical attributes and you have the tools and you originally had the hype and then maybe it didn't work out in college for the system, for him, for his mentality, for, if you talk to some of the Penn State coaches, and I won't name them, some actually point to work ethic and some think he was a little too arrogant in himself, thinking he was going to walk in the door to an NFL team right away and getting on commercials and he was going to be the man. There are some that go in that direction. But as you put it, no matter any of that, when you have the physical tools, there's going to be an NFL coach that's going to say, I can fix them. Yeah, you can text me, say it was his fault. I can fix him. I can get the most out of him. He has all these tools. We're in a different situation now. This is the NFL. The offense is different. We're not going to have all the problems that even the best college programs are going to have more issues roster construction wise than an NFL team. So that all could certainly be on the side of Drew Aller having success. Aside from receiver, aside from QB, aside from what we talked about so far, what else do you need to see the Steelers do in this draft? In particular, even on defense, any other players out there and prospects you want to mention that you can point to that, hey, watch for this player in this particular round and filling other holes? There's certainly other holes on this team outside of future QB, wide receiver depth, tight ends, as I mentioned earlier, O-line. I mean, the Steelers were definitely a flawed roster last year and have been so for years now with a different system.
Yeah, I would say left guard and then backup tackle on offense and a third tight end. Those are probably the other
Yeah.
needs.
Yeah.
On Will Kagmerick from Ohio State, a good blocker, was in for a visit today. I think he's someone to keep an eye on. On defense, I don't think there are any hard and fast like needs. I think there are a lot of wants.
Okay.
Slot
Okay.
corner, free
Okay.
safety, linebacker, and another D tackle all seem like things they could definitely use for different reasons.
Yeah.
Cam Hayward's not going to be around forever. They probably need one more D tackle going forward. I think they're probably good for
Yeah.
this year, but I think if you could draft one to sort of preemptively replace Cam Hayward, I think that would be very beneficial. Especially, I just think about the work he did with Derek Harmon last year and how well that
Yeah.
went. It'd be really nice to have Cam's
Yeah.
replacement on board before he has to be Cam's replacement and give him a year
Yeah.
to kind of work
Yeah.
with him.
Yeah.
Patrick Queen entering the last year of his contract, and I think a difficult scenario to envision him being extended. So linebacker to me, pretty high on the list. And then free safety, Jaquan Brisker just on a 1-year deal, not any depth there to speak of at all. And slot corner, I think that's where Jalen Ramsey is going to play this year, but he certainly doesn't have to stay there. And he's also going to be making a lot of money here and isn't getting any younger. I think someone who could take that job either now or in the future would be a good investment. So they're probably pretty set on the outside with Joey Porter Jr., Dean, and Samuel all back. I think that's probably the one, and then outside linebacker. I
Yeah.
mean, listen, we said last year they didn't need an outside linebacker, and they drafted one anyway. This year they really don't need an outside linebacker. So yeah, I mean those are the positions, the boxes I'm sort of expecting them to check. And like, just throw this out there. They have these, I think, 3 7th-round picks. Wouldn't be crazy to see them draft a punter either. They let,
Okay.
they did bring Cameron Johnston back.
Yeah.
But yeah, he didn't have a great year last year. Got hurt a bunch. It wouldn't be crazy to see that box get checked either.
Yeah, that would definitely be be interesting and a nice footnote of this draft here in Pittsburgh. We'll see the cheers or what else is said if that is the case. But yeah, at that point in the draft, why not potentially? Now, do you feel that way about the defense though, in terms of being more wants than needs and kind of being set for this season, because you think it's going to be good enough to at least be a playoff team, even be better than a year ago, or because that's just their life and there's only so much you can do for the roster for this coming season. You are really looking more to the future, even though, of course, they're trying to win now as well, off of what they'll say. And the reason why I'm asking that is they allowed a lot of yards last year. There were a lot of games the defense wasn't good enough. They're going to figure some injuries and missed games from the TJ Watts, from the Cam Haywards, etc. Defense as is hard to sell that it's near championship level, let alone even advancing in the playoffs level, which, of course, the fan base wants to break the drought of not winning a playoff game since the 2016 season. Can they do any of those things based on what they do in the draft? Or are they going to need to go in other routes of the offseason? Or do you actually think it's better?
I just think they did a lot of work in free agency to not
Yeah. Okay.
need anything. Like none of those are acute needs. They have every spot on the roster. In fact, including like most of the sort of depth guys that you play. You know, sort of the third, fourth D tackles, the sixth defensive back. Those guys are playing a lot, right? The third and fourth edge rushers, even if they're not starters, those guys are playing a lot.
Yeah.
They have guys who have been there, done that on their resume at every spot. There's not a place in the defense where there is a guy currently on the depth chart where you're like, he probably shouldn't be there. So can they upgrade? Yeah, absolutely. Can they solidify things for the future that currently do not look solid for the future? Yeah, for sure. But I don't think there's a spot where they need a rookie to walk in the door and play a lot on defense.
Yeah. I mean, signing Jamel Dean. I mean, they have made some moves there, so that is a point. It's not exactly the same roster from a year ago, but that's the freakout session of is the defense good enough? Alan Saunders here of Steelers Now, joining me on Mic Drop, talking Steelers in the NFL Draft. We're going to be covering it next week here in Pittsburgh. Now, to get you out of here, I do want to ask a question that's often asked every single season. Sometimes I feel like they do it. Sometimes maybe they don't. They've made some surprise moves in the last decade or so. Omar Khan now running the ship with Mike McCarthy. This is McCarthy's first draft as the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And you're covering it every single day. The draft is covered extensively every single minute of every single day, if not every single second. But in all reality for you, how much of the Steelers movement, people they have in for visits, rumors, your reporting, national reporting, sourcing, other colleagues of yours sourcing, etc., do you think they are legitimately tipping their hand in any way, especially in the early rounds, in the first round? Or do you think there's room that they will throw a monkey wrench into things and have an early trade or surprise you and your colleagues or do something that is not exactly going to be mocked to them?
I don't think a trade would surprise anyone. The
Okay.
first round pick being someone that they did not either have a formal interview with at the combine or bring in on a top 30 visit, I
Yeah.
would give a very, very low percentage. It will be someone from
Okay.
one of those groups.
Yeah, they almost always do
You know,
that.
like if you look at the groups, you say, oh, well, there's 10 wide or 11 wide receivers, and that you're like, they're tipping their hand. I was like, the other GMs can look at the depth chart. That's not really tipping their hand,
Well,
you
yeah.
know, to say like, hey, looks like the Steelers really freaking need a wide receiver. Like it, you know,
Yeah,
it's
we all
not
know that, right? Yeah.
not like that's not a secret.
Sure.
You know, tipping their hand might be doing something, you know, unexpected. I suppose, like I don't. Everything they've done lines up with what they clearly need, and so I
Sure.
don't think they're
Yeah.
giving away any information in that regard. Um, Maybe exclusionary in some cases. You know, like for example, they haven't shown a lot of interest in certain guys. Maybe you could kind of check them off their list, but you know that's about as far as I'd be willing to go.
Yeah, or if they go offensive line as their first pick, would that at all be surprising? I mean, it's still a
No,
need
I think
position, but
offensive line would be the second most likely position after
yeah,
wide receiver.
right.
Whether it's one of those fallers, Iwane, Monroe
Yeah,
Freeling, they were at his pro day. They brought in Spencer Fano and Caden Proctor, who
yeah,
they've talked to. They had a combine formal with him as well. So there's four options at
yeah,
offensive line in the first round. To me, that's clearly the second most likely position. They brought in Emmanuel McNeil Warren, the safety from Toledo. I think they talked to Dylan Thieneman at the combine. So maybe safety is in the mix there. There's two guys that could be first round picks. But you know, I mean, I think to me it's like 80-90% it's either a wide receiver or an offensive line.
yeah. I think that's probably the case for sure. But would you think it's fair to say though, because there have been recent years, and I'm talking the last decade, and even when we were doing this coverage together, where most people in the know could almost predict the literal draft pick for years on end. Like the media percentage was pretty good. The Najee Harris, for example, draft that pretty much everybody was already debating the legitimacy of drafting a running back or not going into it for weeks because they just knew what the Steelers were going to do. Do you think this year, at least the actual draft pick is more up in the air than in a long time? Is that fair?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think because one,
And is there any way that could be surprising, at least the
there's a
pick and the
couple of
player?
different positions that it could be. And really, I think it's been a while since we got to this point and we weren't
Yeah, it's
almost
a few years.
certain what the position was going to be.
Because there was a string, there were several years in a row where we could all name the player, the
I mean, I think
position, and it was boring
2021 we
almost.
were all pretty sure it was going to be running back,
Yeah,
and it was just whether both ETN or Najee Harris were going to be there,
sure.
and then if so, which one? 2022, we all knew it was going to be a quarterback. Was it
Yeah,
going to be Kenny Pickett or was it going to be Malik Willis?
and then Pickett was there. Yeah,
2023 was it was going to be a tackle and who was going to be there. 2024 it was going to be a tackle and who was going to be there.
yeah, and even going back to
2025
like Devin Bush when they traded to get him, like
tackle. Well, now that
yeah,
one at least like
there
we
was
knew
some
they
surprise
needed
because of
a
the trade.
linebacker, but it wasn't
Yeah,
obvious how they were going to get there.
sure,
That
sure,
one was
sure.
that was probably the last time there was a real draft day surprise. The
Maybe.
difference for me this year is there are 5 wide receivers I think they could legitimately take at 21. And
Okay.
that's probably a a bigger group than we've seen. And also 12 picks makes trading up very, very convenient for them.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah,
this is not a year where they should at all shy away from that. And
yeah,
so I think those two things combined, like I would say the likelihood of them staying at 21 is probably lower than I can remember at this time, just based on that level of ammunition.
yeah,
And then the way the draft falls, I think it is probably the most the most difficult to project pick because there are just so many choices.
yeah.
Uh, you know, I feel good about saying it'll be a wide receiver or an offensive lineman, but I'm still only narrowing that down to 10 guys. That's not
Yeah,
really saying a whole lot.
yeah, yeah. We're gonna be in a scenario here where I'm gonna need real proof. If people are like, "Oh, I knew that was gonna be the pick all day, but I didn't write about it because I didn't want to," or like, I don't want to hear any of those comments that some people are going to try to argue. Do you have any ranking that you can give us though, in terms of it, even just for you? All these wide receivers, it's likely going to be wide receiver. People are just picking every different one in terms of people that are out there mocking. Who do you think, if you had to rank it, if you're running the Steelers draft board, would realistic positions and options and wide receivers the Steelers could get? How would you rank that? Like, who do you want the most, second most, third most? Any ranking you can give?
To me, Jordan Tyson is the best player in the draft class besides Fernando Mendoza outside of his injury issues. I
Yeah.
think they've been way overblown in that it's not like it's a bad knee that's going to be bad
Okay.
forever or some sort of thing that's going to continue. It was just a number of
Yeah.
things that happened to happen to him. His tape is better than Carnell Tate's. I think he's the most talented receiver in the draft class. If he even gets close to 21, I think the Steelers should trade up and get him.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely fair. Now, I guess I'll get you out of here with this. Do you have a pick? Can you mock a player to the Steelers here for us on mic drop on Sirius XM? You can reserve the right to change it up when you release your official mock on
I would
Steelers now.
say if they stay at 21, Casey Concepcion is the pick.
Okay, and then outside of that, outside of getting a solid receiver, anything they need to do to make this a winning draft? Like what just in general, what do they need to accomplish here to leave the draft and you can write them an A minus, A plus, maybe even a B plus, like any grade that or above, what needs to happen? And then if it's a failed draft, what goes down?
I think with 12 picks and 5 in the top 100 right now, I think they need to get 4 starters out of this draft class. I don't think any of them need to be Pro Bowlers. That'd be great.
Certainly for next year, not next year. Yeah.
But I think, and they don't need to all start this season, but
Right.
you need to get 4 guys who look like they are sort of cornerstone pieces for multiple years at positions where they currently do not have those answers. If they do that, that'll be a pretty good draft.
Yeah. And if they don't do that, then there has to be some reasons why, or it wouldn't be as great of a draft. They at least got to get a couple out of those, but 4 I think is pretty reasonable when you do have 12 picks. Appreciate the time, Alan. I know you are a busy man. You have a lot to keep writing about here leading into the NFL draft. I will be there covering it. Maybe we'll see each other. I don't know if I'm going to be on the south side. So if you're going to be camped out in there, maybe we won't, but I'll see your colleagues. And it'll be a wild atmosphere nonetheless that we'll be talking about for years to come, no matter how this shakes out for the Steelers or for the city with the NFL draft in Pittsburgh. Thanks, man.
Thanks. We'll see you.
Alan Saunders of Steelers Now. He runs the Steelers site within the Sports Now family of networks. Of course, I run the West Virginia Sports Now site that covers the Mountaineers, and that's why I brought up that I covered Aller's game, and stat-wise, that was his best game against the 2023 Mountaineers that won 9 games, and we saw what happened after that. But the big games, the mistakes, that's the pause for some. But when you get into the later rounds, it's hard not to salivate and just want to take a shot at somebody with that pure talent and that pure ability and those physical attributes. And yeah, him over Carson Beck all day. Carson Beck screams a college quarterback, a great college quarterback that'll be remembered by Georgia and Miami fans for years to come, college-wise, and go to those reunions. Maybe a backup in the NFL, maybe some mop-up duty in the NFL. I'm sure he'll get a time in the NFL, but as the face of your franchise, as the guy, as the next decade player, unlikely. Maybe Aller won't be that either if what I'm hearing from coaches and what I've heard from Penn State coaches ends up being proven true. But separate from that conversation, the Steelers do need to go wide receiver. They have an opportunity to go wide receiver in many, many different ways, many different players in the early rounds. And that is the one position that every single year there's depth, and it is the one position that you can walk on the field of the NFL and have an impact right away if you are that dude. So we will see if any of them are that dude and if they do go in that direction. And then, of course, what Rodgers decides, if he does tell them, even if not all of us, before the NFL draft kicks off, and then what they do at quarterback, dependent on what Rodgers does. But I think Alan hit the nail on the head there, and I've been saying it, others have been saying it. What Rodgers decides at his age, off of his play from last year, what you have to just assume based on Father Time being freaking undefeated, he's not going to be better in 2026 than he was in 2025. In 2025, he was the best quarterback the Steelers have had in 5 years at least, but he had his rough moments too, and he was not a championship level quarterback. If you think it's all about winning a championship, which I don't think they're going to be winning one this next coming season, then you're probably in trouble anyway. But of course, Rodgers will be the best of the options, I guess. Well, Howard's going to be far away from doing that. Maybe you give him some time and see what you have in him finally. He was that. Why not take him when he was selected in the draft? Maybe somebody in these later rounds, again, Aller, whoever, maybe you bring in and try to do the same thing with if Rodgers is not coming aboard, and maybe then you trade Mason Rudolph, or you want to keep him to be a legit veteran who's been on the field a time or two and has shown you he can at least be serviceable and win a couple of games in a row as a backup. Not going to be the face of the franchise, but can at least do that. Howard hasn't yet shown that. And of course, a rookie coming in is not going to show it. likely no one on this team under center is going to be leading you to the promised land this coming season, even though fans don't want to hear that. That's just not an option. That's just likely not going to be happening. And it's part of why I wouldn't keep waiting all day for Aaron Rodgers to make this decision. If he tells them by the draft, great. If he tells them at the draft or before the draft, I still don't know. I would get pretty close to saying, Aaron, sorry, great play in 2025, at least solid play. Appreciate coming aboard then. Tomlin's gone. You're going to go with him. And that'll be a 1 year, 10-year for you as a Pittsburgh Steeler. And I know you and McCarthy have the connection. Maybe you can turn it on and maybe even elevate because you're under McCarthy again. But we are not waiting into the summer. We are not waiting into training camp for you. We're going to do what we're going to do in the draft independent of you. But we're also not going to let you hold us hostage and even embarrass us just perception-wise. We're not winning a championship with you. You're likely not going to be better than you were a season ago. And we're not just going to let you linger and let you just drag this out all through the summer, where we are the one reported on nationally that we are waiting on bended knee for you. If he doesn't tell me, if I am Rooney, if I am Mike McCarthy, if I am Omar Khan, before the draft, regardless of what, as Alan said, he may tell the fans or allowed to be put in a press release or even reported, because we know he doesn't like when Adam Schefter or anyone nationally or Alan or anyone in Pittsburgh reports anything on him. Certainly more nationally. He doesn't mind the local media. He's been a nice guy, by the way, to cover when I've been around him, and Alan being around him a lot more from what I've heard. He has been great to cover. Not a problem to cover at all, but he doesn't love the national reporting on him. At least he didn't in the past. So maybe he doesn't want to put it out there, but he'll just let them know, hey, I'm coming back. Just don't put it out there. That's fine. Or he could let them know, hey, I'm not. I'm going to retire. Don't put it out there yet. They respect him, not put it out there, and then do what they're going to do in the draft. But if he gives them I legit don't know, then I think you move on anyway. I think you tell them, hey, man, what are we doing? This doesn't need to be a whole thing that goes on until August, it goes on until July. Is it just that you want to miss some camps? I mean, if that's the only thing, okay. But eventually you got to put up or shut up, and eventually you got to grow a pair in a way, and you got to have some wherewithal in yourself to not let Aaron Rodgers embarrass you as a franchise, and drag this out any further. So if you get the answer by the draft, even if it's not publicized, great. I do think they act in a way independently of Rodgers' decision, or at least should, at quarterback wise. I think it's a later round pick. I think they're taking a flyer on somebody. I think maybe they give some time to Will Howard if Rodgers is not there. If he is there, of course, he's the starter. Maybe it changes at the end of the year if they don't play well and they're out of the race or whatever, or if Rodgers gets hurt. Or obviously, if he tells them, and I don't know, I would say, hey, thanks, but no thanks. We are moving on. We are going to do this, this, and this, and we are no longer waiting for you. Maybe it's a polarizing thought. I'm not the only one with it. And it's really the situation the Steelers have found themselves in. And it's really the only decision they can make. But, yeah, they could potentially wait for him roster-wise. But if they want to know by the draft and he doesn't give them that answer by the draft, then he's spurning you again, and he's not respecting what you've now publicly said. That was not said publicly a year ago. This is a little different. You have a new coach in there that he's obviously familiar with. They need to know by the draft from Aaron Rodgers. They need to act regardless of his decision, but they need to not wait for him forever either. That'll do it for this edition of the show. Alan Saunders of Steelers Now. That's where you can check out his work and also find him on social media. And you will be able to find both of us covering the NFL draft in Pittsburgh. We are now just over a week away. So we're recording this here, 8-9 days away from the NFL draft in Pittsburgh. It's going to be really, really cool for the city. Really, really cool scenery. Really, really cool economy-wise for sure. As a fan, I don't know what you're going to hear some draft picks announced. You're going to have a lot of concerts, festivities, a lot of things to do. It won't be like a game. It'll be a sea of humanity, though, because the Penguins are also going to be playing home playoff games at some point throughout that weekend. But I don't know if I'd go as a fan. I do think it's a bit of an overrated experience to go as a fan. Like, what are you doing? It's not like going to a game. But covering it, we'll see what that'll be as well. I'm gonna enjoy. I just had to have the experience of covering it. Who knows when it'll be back in Pittsburgh. And, in terms of the numbers of people expected to be in the city on the North Shore in particular at one time, just for the draft, really, it could be the single most successful event in the city's history from an economic perspective and even number of people. And obviously not all going to be in the stadium, going to be around the area, but yeah, big games, playoff games. I don't know if it's going to be this number based on what the NFL draft normally draws. Again, you can find every episode of Mic Drop everywhere you get your podcasts. You can find it on the Believe Network main page by searching Mic Drop or searching my name, Mike Asti. And you can also find Believe Network shows on Sirius XM.